Hello, everyone. First of all, many thanks to the organizers for the invitation. It's a pleasure, and I'm very happy that this kind of initiatives are happening in our region, because I really think it's time to bring neurotech field to South America. So first, I'm going to introduce myself briefly. I am Florencia Garro. I'm from Argentina. I'm a biomedical engineer, and I'm specialized in brain-computer interface design. So I have worked several years as a technical consultant, and now I'm in my third year of PhD at the Italian Institute of Technology here in Italy, in which I am trying to improve robotic rehabilitation by looking at the physiological information of the patients, especially the brain activity. So for today, I wanted to bring you a short overview about neurotechnology in the field of rehabilitation, and some of the last developments, which I hope will set the basis for a good discussion about this field. So let's start by the very definition of neurotechnology. They are systems or technologies that use the brain activity as a direct input for working. They collect this brain activity, then they somehow decode it to extract meaningful information, and then they use this information to provide an output, which is usually used to control a device, a computer, a robot, a video game, etc. The idea behind neurotechnology is rather simple. It's any technology that allows direct communication with the nervous system. But this generally leads to very, very complex systems, as we will see. So why is neurotech promising, or why is a hot topic nowadays? It has been developed and explored because in the last years, there has been a change in the way we see the brain itself. We used to think that the brain was something static, that it developed during our childhood, and then it remained more or less the same for the rest of our adult life. This was because when they started to study the brain, the only possibility was to look at dead tissue, like tissue that was extracted from dead bodies. It seemed then that the brain was divided very specifically into areas, and then nothing else seemed to change. Also, they knew that the neurons could not be replaced when they died, so they didn't grow again. So we used to think that the brain was pretty much static. But then new technology allows us to see the live brain. And we discovered this, that the brain is actually a network. What you can see in the right figure is a tactography that is showing all the brain connections. So how the different areas are connecting between each other. And this network works as a whole. It's not isolated in different areas that have just one particular task, as we used to believe. So we discovered that within that network, the connections can change and adapt according to the person's experience and knowledge. And this allows the brain to learn and adapt our entire life. So this adaptation mechanisms is called brain plasticity. And when it was discovered, it opened the door to a big, big question. That is, can the brain be rewired? And this is why neurotech is so promising, because it potentially can help us rewiring the brain, changing this network as we need it. In particular, in rehabilitation, when there is a damage to the brain, we could try to induce brain plasticity to recover from the brain damage. So how does it work? In a nutshell, just to be very, very short about this, we have an incredible number of neurons communicating with each other in the outer layer of the brain. This communication is called neural activity, and it produces an electrical signal that we can measure by placing sensors inside or outside the brain. It also produces metabolic changes that we can measure because the neurons that are active are consuming more energy. So we can see the change in the metabolism when a brain area increases its activity. Okay, so if we look at the electrical activity of the neurons, we can use different type of electrodes to record this signal. Basically, we have non-invasive electrodes that are just placed in the scalp and are very used because, well, they don't require brain surgery to be placed, so they are like more user-friendly. And they have, we have invasive electrodes that require the implantation of the electrode inside the head. The main advantage of invasive electrodes that, they need brain surgeries to be placed, so they are quite risky. But they have a very nice advantage that they provide much more better quality of the signal in comparison with the non-invasive. This is because they are physically closer to the neurons that we want to listen, and they don't have any all the tissues that the head between, for instance, the scalp, the skull, etc. So they are in direct contact with the brain. So with these different types of electrodes, we will have different types of resolution of the signal. And this is more or less what we see when we record electrical activity from the brain. So now that we know why and how we register the brain activity, we can take a look at the more technical part of neurotechnology. So there are many different types of neurotechnology, but all these systems usually have these main components. So we have the brain activity, that is the signal we want to collect. We have the acquisition system, that is the hardware, the electrodes and the recording system that is taking the signal from the brain. Then we have a signal processing step in which we have an algorithm that is cleaning and preparing the signal to extract the information that we need. Then we have a feature extraction step that is usually with machine learning or artificial intelligence algorithms in general, that they extract from the signal the information that we need. And then we have the device, that is the application of the neurotechnology, that is connected with the brain activity, is connected with the user, and it provides some feedback to the user. So no matter what type of neurotechnology we are talking about, it's more likely to have one of all of these, or at least most of these components. And there is not like a general standard for names inside neurotechnology because it's a new field and we haven't agreed a lot in naming. But we can try and divide it into three main categories. So we have brain modulators, we have brain-machine interfaces, and we have neuroprosthesis. So now the idea is to see one by one and then some applications in rehabilitation. For instance, we have brain modulators. There are devices that modulate the brain patterns by applying currents or magnetic fields externally. Or they can also electrically stimulate the deep brain structures, like in this example. What we are looking in this example is an electrode implanted in the brain structure that is affected in Parkinson's disease. And they stimulate it to treat the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. This is called deep brain stimulation because it's stimulating the deep structures of the brain. And it's like a pacemaker, like the pacemaker for the heart, but for the brain, so a little bit more complex, let's say. These kind of devices are now widely used. So these are commercial devices. They are being implanted in clinics. They are also being investigated to treat other disorders like depression or obsessive compulsive disorders. So it's also a very promising field, the stimulation of the brain with brain modulators. Then we have brain-machine interfaces, which are my topic, let's say, which are devices that connect the brain with another device, such as a robotic limb, a wheelchair, a computer, etc. So brain-machine interfaces, the idea is to restore motor functions in people who cannot move or who cannot communicate because they have a brain injury, a limb amputation, or a disabled neurological conditions. So they are thought as assistive devices. The first example that I can bring to you about brain-machine interfaces are the devices that are used as an alternative communication system for people who cannot speak. So in this case, the person can control a speller that is in a screen. So the person can see the screen and see and choose the letters that they want to speak, and decide with the brain activity when to select a letter and thus to create a word. So this type of system has also been widely investigated. And also, I mean, there are invasive and non-invasive versions of these devices. This example here, it's an invasive device because people were implanted with an electrode that was recording activity from the brain and then used to pick up the letter that the person was selecting on the screen. But these spellers are a little bit slow because the person has to select letter by letter to form the phrases. So some recent developments are exploring the possibility of speech neuroprosthesis, in which the idea is to directly decode the speech intention from the motor cortex that controls all the speech apparatus of in the mouth and also in the throat. So as you can see here, if I can show you, yes. We have this kind of systems in which the person is implanted over the brain area that normally controls the vocal tract. And then this works in closed loop with a speller that asks a question. Then the person thinks about the response. This sensor is connected to a real-time decoder, and the decoder conveys it into a phrase. So this is an actual example of a user. It's one of the first users of these kind of devices. And as you can see, the person is not spelling a word. It's just thinking in the entire phrase. This, of course, is not very straightforward. It takes a lot of training because the algorithm needs to recognize the different patterns of the different words. So it's very heavy to train, and it's in lab. I mean, it's being investigated in laboratories, but it's very promising as a technology. Okay, so then we have, if this works, okay. So then we also can find brain-machine interfaces for motor rehabilitation. That is when the person cannot move due to an accident or a brain injury. This is very studied because it has been shown that the same areas of the brain that are active when the person is performing physically a movement are the same areas that are active when the person are just imagining the movement. So this is called motor imagery, the imagination of movement. And it's very useful for us, for brain-machine interface designers, because we can still know from the brain activity when the person is trying to move, even if they cannot do it physically. So we can just pick up the imagination of the motor intention of the person and try to convert it into an output for controlling a device. And we also know that we have a dedicated brain area for controlling each part of our body. So we have a sort of body map inside of our brain. So if we place an electrode in the right hand area, for instance, and this area activates, we know that the person is trying to engage their right hand in the movement. So we can look at the specific part of the brain that controls the hand or the fingers or the limbs. And we can try to use that signal as a control signal for controlling robots. For instance, in this video, we can see one of the first proof of concept of this. She was one of the first users of brain-machine interfaces. Again, this is invasive because she has an implant in her motor area. but she's controlling the robot arm with her intentions to move. So she's thinking in moving her own hands, which she can't. And with that, she controls the robot. And this is not new. This is quite old, actually. It's from like 10, maybe 12 years ago. But it has been widely used and explored as an alternative for controlling robots. Then we have, if I can go out of here, okay. Then we have more recent developments in which the idea is to try to restore the movement of the paralyzed limb itself by connecting the brain activity with an electrical stimulator instead of a robotic arm. In this case, what you are seeing here is Ian Buchard, that is a very famous brain-machine interface user. He has an invasive electrode placed in his motor cortex, and he's moving his hand, his arm, by thinking about it. He cannot move it because he got an accident and he's tetraplegic. So all the movement that she's doing, he's controlling his hands, but by just thinking about it. So we have this brain-machine interface that connects his brain with his own hand again. And the beauty of this is that his brain is starting to regain functions of the right hand because of brain plasticity. So the brain is starting to relearn how to control the hands with the let's say the nerves that they are still intact. So he's slowly regaining functions. Of course, he's not gonna recover the entire hand, but I mean, from not moving it at all and being able to move it, it's a big step. So this is also very, very promising technology in rehabilitation. Then we have another application of brain-machine interfaces in motor rehabilitation. That is the control of prostheses in amputees, in which they are able to use their prostheses as they were using their biological limbs, because the prosthesis is controlled by muscle activation. So when the person thinks in activating the muscles that control the hand, the prosthesis takes that input and moves as it was the normal hand, let's say. These kind of devices are not pure brain-machine interfaces because they are not controlled directly by the brain signal, but by the muscle activation. But I mean, the muscle activation comes from the brain through the peripheral nervous systems. So we can say that they are like almost brain-machine interface. Fair enough. And in this kind of applications, we have hands, a lot of hand developments in which the amputee can just adjust the hand at their own desire. And then they can use it, sorry about the advertising, they can use it as their normal hand. What you can see here is that she's setting up the hand to calibrating it, and then she can start using it as it was her own hand. So she doesn't need to think about it or to learn how to do it. She just needs to think about her biological hand, let's say, to control the prosthesis. And as you can see, it's very accurate, the movements and in the response of the movements. I also wanted to show you another hand, that this is one in the lab that I'm working here in Italy. This is another hand that also has the same principle. So the idea is that it uses the muscles of the forearm to be controlled. And as you can see, people can use it in real life, like in normal activities, just by thinking in moving their original hand, let's say. So this is just for showing you different models of hands. And I wanted to show some nice movements, like while he's working, he can use the hand quite naturally. Of course, it's still not the same as having your biological hand, but it's very nice to use. Okay. So they are also working in this kind of brain-machine interfaces to restoring the sense of touch, because when you lose, when you have a brain injury and you cannot move, you also cannot sense, you don't have the sense of touch. And this is very difficult because sense of touch is very important in order to regulate the movement and to have feedback about the external world. So in this case, these brain-machine interfaces, it's also invasive. And what he's doing, he has the brain-machine interfaces implanted, and I will put the subtitles here because I think you cannot hear. So what he's doing is that the researcher is touching the fingers of the robotic hand. The robotic hand is connected to the brain-machine interface in his brain, and he's perceiving which finger is being touched as it was his. So he can just feel the touch of the robotic hand. So I will put it again just to. In this case, this is amazing because he's receiving information from the brain-machine interface instead of giving a control to the machine interface. But the idea is always the same: to restore, to rehabilitate one ability of humans. Then, moving into brain-machine interfaces applications, we also have neurofeedback. And neurofeedback it works more or less in the same way that we were discussing about motor rehabilitation, but it tries to rehabilitate cognitive functions. How? By connecting the brain into a stimulus, like it can be a video game or a visual or auditory feedback, and trying to induce the brain to learn and maintain a desired brain activity. For instance, this has been very researched in areas like attention deficit disorders for children, in which they are using this kind of applications to do some kind of training into the brain and to induce the brain to retake the healthy brain patterns that they should have. And for this also, these brain-machine interfaces are being plugged into virtual reality, which leads to very nice applications, let's say, like this, that is Galea, that has virtual reality here, and then sensors for censoring the brain activity. So what you can use, what you can do with this, you can develop games in virtual reality that are controlled by your brain. So in this case, you're moving the character just by thinking. And this can be used as an strategic therapeutic approach to restore the brain patterns that are abnormal, let's say. And this is a particular device, but we have plenty of this. This is like a summary of different EEG device, like electroencephalogram device that record brain signal from the electrical activity of the brain, and then they connect it directly into a virtual reality game. Okay, so these are more or less let's say, the main applications in rehabilitations of neurotechnology so far. But I would like to introduce the last type of neurotechnology in rehabilitation by posing this question. That, oh no, I don't know if you, maybe you can't see it, but the idea is how far can we push the limits of brain plasticity? We were seeing that people were recovering some movement when they were engaging in interaction with these brain-machine interfaces. So how far can we push this recovery? And in this, for answering this, we have neuroprosthesis. Neuroprosthesis are devices implanted in the brain that aim at replacing brain activity or reconnect disconnected brain areas, which so far is just an idea because they are being investigated in laboratories, but it's not out in the market yet, or we don't have like this nice proof of concept with implanted people. But there has been some advances in humans, like the proof of concept of a neural prosthesis for restoring and improving memory function. So the idea will be to have this brain prosthesis, which will help our brain area dedicated to memory storage to work better. So it will act as a bridge between different areas of the brain to connect them and to enhance this skill. In this field, we have another promising work in this area. There are implantable stimulators that enable voluntary control of walking in people who had suffered a spinal cord injury. So these are people who cannot walk, and they implanted this stimulator in their spinal cord where they had the lesion. And they proved that after a few months, the participants were able to regain voluntary control over the muscles that were previously completely paralyzed, but this without the stimulation. So they were giving rehabilitation with the stimulator to the patients, and then the patients were regaining some sensations and some control without this the stimulation. So they were eliciting again this brain plasticity, and the brain was relearning how to control the muscles. And they were also able to walk or cycle outside of the lab with the stimulation on. So it's also a very nice rehabilitation device, assistive device. And the last example I wanted to bring you for today is the brain-to-brain interface, in which the idea, again, is not to connect a brain with the device, but a brain with another brain. And with this concept, we could connect a brain that needs rehabilitation with a healthy one and let them collaborate together to create the rehabilitation. And I mean, it's just an idea so far, so it seems like science fiction, and so far it is. But I'm sure that we will see some advances in this area near in the future, because they are doing some developments and they have proved that it can be done. So we can connect brain-to-brain interfaces. We still don't know why or how they can be connected, but it technically can be done. So, and of course, we have plenty of issues when talking about neurotechnology. Not only technical and technological issues that our current knowledge cannot solve, because I mean, brain-machine interfaces are still not working very reliable. That's why they are not outside in the market. But most importantly, we also have ethical and legal aspects. I won't go deep into it, but I just wanted to mention that there are several initiatives that are trying to provide a framework and open the discussion for the ethical and legal aspects of neurotechs. They are very important because we are dealing with patients, we are dealing with an improvement in the quality of life, but we are also dealing with a lot of safety, privacy, and autonomy issues that needs to be discussed. So we need to start having these conversations before we have neurotech in our everyday life that seems closer in time. And even though all the issues that we have in the field, I would like to close with this same question that I did before, which is one that I'm fascinated about. I mean, how far can we push the limits of brain plasticity? So can we use these limits to restore people's ability and quality of life? Can we use them to let people communicate, move, be independent again? So I think that we now with Neurotech can start answering this question. So let's build proper neurotechnology to answer it. Thank you very much for your attention, and you have my contact info.